Hey guys, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge, and I'm really excited that you have decided to take time out of your busy schedules to come and hang out today. We're really grateful for you tuning in. And if you have been listening to the podcast for a while, we really appreciate this. Thank you so much. Hopefully you have subscribed so that you never miss an episode. But if not, or if you are new to the show, get yourself over to iTunes, Stitcher, animaltrainingacademy.com, or whatever it is you're listening to this podcast on, and hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We are bringing you today's episode on behalf of the Animal Training Academy, or ATA membership. If you like the conversations in these podcasts, then I want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people within the ATA membership area, which you can find out more about over on the ATA website. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web classes, plus a huge library of videos and projects to problem solve different training situations. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group, forums area, and WhatsApp chat groups. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour nerds. Well, we will get started on today's episode where we'll be talking to one Malena DeMartini. Malena CTC, CDBC, is renowned in the dog training world for her work on canine separation anxiety disorder, SA. Her book, Treating Separation Anxiety in Dogs, has helped countless numbers of dogs, and her recent online course for guardians called Mission Impossible is now out. In addition to writing and lecturing worldwide, Malena oversees a team of top separation anxiety trainers and runs an internationally accessible certification program for accomplished dog professionals looking to hone their skills. Malena is passionate about furthering education in this field through science-based methods and is in the process of collaborating on an intensive study with a leading university to help further advance the knowledge in the field. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome today's guest onto the show today, who is patiently waiting by. Malena, how are you?
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm fantastic, and I really appreciate your very kind introduction, and I truly am grateful that you invited me to be here today.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. The honor, I don't know if you use that word, but I'm going to run with it, is all ours. And for everyone listening, we have one of Animal Training Academy's members, Linda B. Recommend Malena because she's currently doing your course, isn't she?
She sure is, and she's quite fabulous.
I would agree. She is training so many different species. We talk about her all the time on the podcast, to be honest, mainly in relation to her tortoise, Dewberry, who she's doing scent work with.
That is so fun. Oh, I have to add tortoise to my list one of these days, I'm sure.
She's doing amazing things. But let's get started and dive straight into the first question today. Could you please take us all back to where you got going, where you first learned about positive reinforcement animal training, and share some of the stories of the first animals you ever worked with, ever trained using it?
You bet. I am not unlike maybe many other dog professionals, trainers, etc., that I initially was just an average pet guardian, mostly dogs. And due to a variety of experiences with my own animals and some passion that I had growing up with horses, dogs, and cats, I really wanted to change my life from one that was heavily entrenched in corporate America, where I was a statistician, to starting to work with animals. And I was so heavily lucky and rewarded by the universe, where I took a sabbatical from my work and applied to Jean Donaldson's Academy for Dog Trainers, not knowing a single thing about the philosophies behind her school, just being fortunate to have stumbled across that particular education and looking at it as being something really interesting. And it really changed, obviously, the trajectory of not just my education and my experience, but truly the avenue of my life. Previous to that, all the dogs and animals that I had worked with were treated with a balanced method, but just basically from those around me. So I knew very little, and found out more and more through the academy experience that I had how little I actually knew. So because of my experience in the academy, I was able to start to work with dogs, and did stay within the realm of dog training only, positive reinforcement, obviously, and handled all manner of training, all manner of behavior cases, and everything from puppies to aggression, but was very careful in the order of which I took those cases, making sure to take time to gather my experience along the way.
And I don't think we've ever had someone from corporate America. We have, but not in the statistical realm. So I'm curious, when you made the transition, were you able to utilize anything from your previous vocation and bring it into dog training? Was being a statistician beneficial moving forward? And if so, what parts?
Well, I love that question. I think there's two answers to that question. Number one, being in corporate America, I had to learn to, whether I learned it or it was part of going through my college experience of business and economics and statistics and so forth. And then moving into corporate America, I had to learn about presenting a professional front. And I took that very seriously in my corporate world. And then when I became a dog trainer, I took it equally as seriously. And I felt how this is a professional business that we run. And I feel equally as strongly about that today. I feel like we should be careful about and fastidious about the professional demeanor that we present to our clients, to the public, to other colleagues, whether those colleagues are trainers, whether they're vets or veterinary behaviorists, and so on and so forth, or even colleagues in the world of academia. So in that respect, I think it helped me present my business in such a way that it was coming from the front of I am a professional. As far as the statistics, I think it also helped me because, well, frankly, I was a spreadsheet sort of wizard, and I loved back then and love now collecting and analyzing data. And there's a lot of data that we can gather and disseminate and dissect and analyze, whether it's about the one individual dog that you're working with, or whether it's collectively about your business, or whether it's about, I'm seeing 10 different, in my case, more than 10, but many different separation anxiety dogs. And what can I derive from, all of them? Where are their commonalities? Where are their differences? And how can we use that information? And so I do a lot of data collecting. And I think we'll be probably talking about that in a little bit as well.
And when you say data collection, we always say, you got to collect your data to people that are asking me questions about their animal's behavior and should they do this and should they do that. And I'm always saying very casually, well, implement whatever strategy you're going to implement and then collect your data and see what your dog's saying. But I'm saying it in a super casual way. And am looking at a quote that was put in the Animal Training Academy Engage Facebook page this morning by Liz Thompson. She said, "Remember, kids," and it's like one of those memes, and there's a picture of some scout leader, and it says, "Remember, kids, the only difference between screwing around in science is writing it down."
That's fabulous.
So what can you say to the people that aren't writing stuff down and aren't, like, how can we incorporate your worldview and your statistical mind and us as dog trainers and pet owners and zookeepers? And is it just writing stuff down or?
Wow. I think that, from the most elementary level, yes, at least writing stuff down. We got to start there, right? And everyone's going to have a bit of a different skill set. What I do, as well as my 60 some odd graduates of my program, we actually record specific data in spreadsheets in a specific fashion. And, we have formulas that, look at the correlation between various data sets, and, we generate graphs and charts in the whole 9 yards, right? So there's a big difference between jotting stuff down in a notebook and generating graphs and charts and, looking at trends in behavior based on the data that we collect. But I think, finding yourself somewhere along that spectrum based on your personal skill set is what's going to be comfortable for you, right? I mean, is everyone going to run out and take a class in spreadsheet skills right now? Probably not. And I know you can't see him, but Ryan is giving me a nod of like, not going to happen.
And I love spreadsheets, but I'm not going to take a class in one.
Exactly. So, but I think if you can at least think of data in this way, what is the animal doing right now? Particularly, what is the animal doing today? And what are the environmental factors, training factors, and varying stimuli that are potentially affecting the animal today or in this scenario. And if you can at least decide on the variables and then step back from that and say, look at that. Every time I train, this is just a simple example. Every time I train after 3 p.m., I don't get as high level of a response from my subject. I have to consider that as, do I need to use a higher motivator when it's after 3 p.m. in the afternoon? Do I need to lower my criteria when it's after 3 p.m. in the afternoon? I mean, I think data can really help us adjust the types of criteria that we use.
I'm going to retract what I said earlier. I do actually want to take a class in spreadsheets because I love them. But so just to rewind a little bit, you're saying in your certification or with your clients, you're actually putting the information into spreadsheets and getting graphs. I don't know if there was anything following that. And but that's amazing. I love that. Wow.
It's also very useful for the client, Ryan, in the sense of particularly for something like separation anxiety, but I could see it also being very useful for many different behaviors and behavior issues, wherein you always at some point in time in any client case will come across a client that says, gosh, I'm so frustrated. I'm not feeling as though we're really making that much progress. And it's super cool to send them a little graph that shows here's day 1 and here we are at week 3 or week 6 or wherever you are in your progress, and say, here was our behavior at this date, and here was our behavior at this date, and here's our growth pattern, or our increase in, for instance, in separation anxiety, our increase in duration, or here's our increase in improvement or something like that, and show them where things are going, or show them how the ratings are stacking up on the dog's incremental increases. It's fun to be able to show them how things are working out.
I'd say it's really important because it's hard to remember to reinforce those little successful wins that we have along the way. This is huge. This is life-changing. I don't know how to implement this, but I want to in my life. So you just came up with all these spreadsheets yourself, yeah, and chucked all the formulas in and figured it out, or how?
Yeah. I guess I'm very lucky that I had, a strong background in working with spreadsheets and stuff, and with statistics and stuff. So, just, little by little, I started to, create this stuff. And I will give a lot of credit to my certified separation anxiety trainers, because I started out with something fairly basic, and a few of them have gone hog wild and created some really amazing things that track all sorts of manner of data. And, obviously between all of us, there are some that are much more proficient than others, but really you don't have to be an expert to be able to track some basic data that will and can influence your day-to-day training.
I love it, and I might just wait until the artificial intelligence catches up and just does it for us. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. We'll see who gets there further, me trying to figure out how to do that in a spreadsheet, or artificial intelligence at the rate it's going. Anyway, we digress. Bring us up to speed and tell people where they can go to find out more information about you now, and what you spend your time doing on a month-to-month basis at the moment.
I love how you say on a month-to-month basis, because in my brain it's sort of like, it's definitely on a moment-to-moment basis, because my days are so filled and so long that it's rough in a positive and exciting way. So insofar as where people can go to find out more about me and the amazing certified separation anxiety trainers, which we call CSATs, the easiest place to locate us is my name, MalenaDeMartini.com. And that's MalenaDeMartini.com. And there's a plethora of information there, not just to find out about what we're doing, but one of the things that I think is really useful there is the number of blogs that we have. That I'm really interested in getting quality information out to, whether it be trainers or vets or vet behaviorists or academia people, and just say, this is what we're doing, this is what we found, and this is something important to remember about working with separation anxiety, whether those are basic facts about working with a dog, or whether those are success stories and so forth, so people can kind of look through and find helpful information that I like to share with everyone. Additionally, I have a Facebook group where we share a lot of information there as well. The blogs get shared there, success stories get shared there, tidbits about what things are happening in general get shared there. The Facebook is called Treating Separation Anxiety in Dogs, and I should have looked really quickly to see what because I know it's like Facebook / and I think it's Separation Anxiety Dogs, something like that. I'll have to share that maybe with you later to see if we can give that address out. Also on my website, and we'll probably be talking about this a little bit upcoming, is access to an online course. And you can find that under the For Owners section. And so we'll touch on that in a bit. And I guess those are probably the easiest places to find me. There are definitely upcoming seminars sort of around the world, and there's a spot on my page and my website that discusses those. And if you do go to the website, you'll be finding out about upcoming free discussions and webinars that I'm going to start to be hosting, that I think it's just important from an educational standpoint that people get to have some sort of, just some free discussions and information dissemination. And then lastly, and this is coming down the pipe in the future, myself and one of my very esteemed colleagues, Casey McGee, and I will be releasing both seminars and a guide of some sort on best practices for shelters and rescues with regard to separation anxiety. And that's sort of a new and very large project that we're working on, and we're really, really excited about it. There is a webinar that we already released to the public about it, and I can't tell you how excited we are about it and how much interest there has been.
Absolutely amazing. And to make it super easy for everyone out there listening, we're going to link to all of this stuff in the podcast write-up. So you can head over to animaltrainingacademy.com, find the podcast episode, and you'll be able to find links to everything mentioned there and navigate to it nice and easily. Hey, thank you so much for sharing everything so far. I absolutely love people's behavioral odysseys and am very inspired by your statistical background and geeking out on spreadsheets moving forward. But let's get into the meat of things. We're going to talk about separation anxiety. And we left this as an open-ended topic. We haven't discussed any specific questions. We're just going to see where the conversation takes us. So maybe start by offering everyone a definition. When we say separation anxiety, obviously this is a label. What does it mean? Can you unpack these two words for us, please?
You bet. And I'm going to do my best to do this and not take up the next hour and a half. So the best that I can do in a limited amount of time and with as few words as possible to try and be as succinct as I can be is that separation anxiety, and I'm going to go forward and backward in this section in just a moment. Separation anxiety is a fear, phobia, and anxious panic response to being left alone. Okay. And when I say alone, I typically, and when I say typically, I mean really most often from a statistical perspective even, alone means without humans present. So there could be a dog or a cat or something like that in the environment, but it's really the humans being gone, human or humans being gone, that elicits the anxious response. Now I said I was going to go backwards a little bit. So I defined separation anxiety, sort of, a very limited definition. But now I'm going to go back and tell you, well, I kind of lied. So I said that that's the definition of separation anxiety. However, separation anxiety is a bit of a misnomer. We use the term separation anxiety or the words separation anxiety a bit like an umbrella term. Separation anxiety is just one of many, many, and boy, if I could go through the list of words, phrases, terms that are used to describe, the quote unquote disorder of dogs that are panicked, phobic, anxious, fearful of being left alone, I would be here all day giving you these various terms. Separation-related behavior disorder, home alone syndrome, hyperattachment syndrome. The list goes on and on and on and on. And I think the two distinctions that you should know of is that typically, and this varies from veterinarian to veterinarian, from researcher to researcher, from trainer to trainer. So there's no real consensus, particularly when you're reading the studies and the literature and the peer-reviewed publications and so forth. There's just no real consensus. But in general, separation anxiety itself is considered sort of the clinical aspect where the dog is anxious, phobic, fearful, etc., panicked when separated from one particular individual, or maybe two, the two partners that, the two guardians, or the one guardian. Isolation distress, on the other hand, is more commonly described as the dog cannot be actually left alone, but if there is somebody, the neighbor, Auntie May, cousin Johnny, somebody, a pet sitter or whatever, as long as there is a warm body present, the dog is fine or generally okay. So it's not specific to one person or one or two people. So there's a distinction between those two. So I like to say that the term separation anxiety is a bit like me saying, hey, Ryan, pass the Kleenex. Well, you know that I'm asking you to pass the facial tissue, even if it doesn't happen to be Kleenex, as in the brand, right? You know what I'm referring to. And so we are very much overusing the term separation anxiety, but it's become such a sort of familiar and household term that we just sort of default to it. So there are better terms. I think, separation-related behaviors probably encompasses it better, but separation anxiety itself is so familiar to us that we just sort of use it as our default.
Right, so that presents a lot of challenges when someone rings you up and says, Malena, we have separation anxiety, help. You're like, okay, slow down. So
Yes.
So just to rephrase, it's defined as fear, phobia, anxious, panic response to being left alone. But there's a distinction between that being related to being separated from a certain individual or peer or group of guardians. Can you say group, or do you find it extends beyond two people, or is it always kind of just limited?
Yeah, you can say group. It could be just the familiar family unit, and then anybody beyond that, or the specific circle of familiar individuals. But that's pretty rare. It's mostly that one or two specific individuals would be the separation anxiety, more clinical separation anxiety. And beyond that, we're really looking more at isolation distress.
And isolation distress is more is just when they don't like being left alone. Period.
That's right.
There's no humans around. So they can be left with cats and dogs and birds and...
No. So isolation distress it's got to be some warm body being a human being. But it's not usually a dog or a cat or the goldfish on the shelf either.
We filmed Phoebe the other day when we went out. We leave the GoPro on sometimes and just check out what she gets up to. She sleeps on the couch most of the time, but she got up and she went to the window and she just sat down next to the cat and went back to sleep. And we had no idea she does that. We'd never seen her do that before. But anyway, collecting some data.
Actually, speaking of data along those lines, I have to tell you something that, I've been knee deep in some research lately, and I have no evidence personally to support or disprove this, but one of the studies that I was reading the other day found that dogs with separation anxiety are not commonly helped by the presence of another dog. However, there seemed to be some evidence that dogs are helped by the presence of a cat. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And, we did not expect that behavior just because we don't see it. very much, the dog choosing to go and sit next to the cat in that close proximity. But with the context of us being out, seemingly in that specific day, we have to collect more data to see if it's a repeated behaviour. But interesting to hear you say that. So another thing that you said was that there is lots of different terms, and obviously this makes it challenging for you when someone comes along and says, how can you help me with my separation anxiety? You need to unpack that a little bit. But you mentioned potentially an offering of a different label you could use to describe it as separation-related behaviours. So what kind of behaviours do you see? What kind of behaviours will you see in a dog when their favourite person or people leave, and you're going to put that separation anxiety label on top of that?
So I love this question for a number of reasons. So I'll tell you the top behaviors that we typically see are vocalization, pacing, and when I say vocalization, that can be along a spectrum, anything from whining to extreme howling, and in between that, there might be some barking, whether that is a little bit intermittent or whether that's, for the duration of a 4-hour absence at the top of their lungs type of thing, right? And so vocalization is one of the many common complaints, as is distraction. And I use that word complaint very intentionally, because oftentimes the reason that people are contacting us is that they have had a complaint from neighbors or the landlord, or do you say from the council in New Zealand, as they do in other parts of the country? Yeah. I didn't know that until I started, working with people in various parts of the world. I was like, the council? Who's the council? So if you've had complaints, and that usually happens due to vocalization issues. Then the other is distraction. Obviously, people are concerned about distraction because there's a monetary value that correlates with the distraction. And then lastly, while it is listed as one of the sort of, 3 top separation anxiety behaviors, elimination goes along with separation anxiety. Now, interestingly, I don't see it as often as it is sort of claimed to be present in a lot of studies. But it is a definite, quote, symptom or manifestation of separation anxiety. There are so many more subtle behaviors that are indicative of separation anxiety or isolation distress. And for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to continue to use the term separation anxiety because that's what everyone's familiar with. There's a lot of dogs, and I would say a terribly high percentage of dogs, that their separation anxiety goes completely unrecognized, unnoticed, unidentified, because they spend the entire day pacing, panting, and drooling, and there's no real outward display that would be inconveniencing the guardian. And therefore, the guardian comes home and says, oh, look at that. You got water all over the floor, the saliva. And, no complaints from neighbors, no complaints from, of destruction, no torn up stuff. So they just assume that the dog is, resting all day long. But when we incorporate video, we really see a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of sitting at the door, pawing, panting, a lot of, pacing at a quick pace from room to room. There can be many subtle signs, even just change in body, the sort of tenseness the body, is being held in, and just the list sort of goes on and on and on. And it tends to be very individualized from dog to dog. And the one caveat I want to make, I can't reveal the exact statistics on this yet, but it's something that's cool that's going to be coming up soon, is that oftentimes people will ask, does your dog shadow you from room to room? And I can, sort of vaguely tell you that a lot of dogs follow their guardians from room to room, and many of those dogs do not have separation anxiety. And even those dogs, and I know this even without looking at the data that has been collected on this, I have worked with a lot of dogs that that unequivocally have separation anxiety or separation-related behavior issues, and we start out with them following from room to room. We resolve the separation anxiety, but the dog still follows from room to room. And so that particular behavior is not something that we would say is diagnostically important. It can be in the suite of indicators, but it doesn't mean that it is separation anxiety.
And along those lines, what else have studies shown? Have they, I'm reminded of anecdotal stuff, so you can tell me if I'm talking bogus or not. But studies where they've measured, and I don't know if cortisol is kind of a thing you use to measure in studies about separation anxiety. Is what kind of data
that they used to what? I'm sorry.
In studies, have there been studies done with levels of cortisol in dogs?
Have.
And so I heard one, once again, this might be anecdotal because I don't have the actual peer-reviewed literature to back up what I'm saying here. So I need you to provide that, your offerings on if I'm talking bogus or not. But they've done some where they've measured cortisol levels in dogs, and they've had high cortisol levels in dogs that are sleeping the whole time or relaxing. So even if your dog is looking relaxed, can we draw from that they are still experiencing what we might label as separation anxiety?
It's a really good question, and it's something that is under study now. And I think, first of all, I think it's fascinating because while I don't remember the actual percentage of a few of these studies that have been done based on cortisol levels, the percentage was extraordinarily high, where they would leave these dogs with videotape running. It took the cortisol level prior to a departure, videotape running, and then take the cortisol level upon return. And obviously, of all the videos they watched, they could discern which dogs they were like, well, that dog's obviously going to have an elevated cortisol level because he's, throwing himself against the door and screaming and running all over the place. So they could say, no question, we're going to get an elevated cortisol level there. But a number of the dogs whose body language appeared relatively calm also had similar levels of elevated cortisol. And that was quite a surprise. Realistically, while that broke my heart to hear and learn, I don't know where the application of that data will go, because most of us don't have, the ability to run the cortisol level when we walk in the door and say, oh, I think my dog was stressed. Similarly, there is a really wonderful data set that has recently been run using I'm going to call it infrared technology, but I don't think that's the correct term. But it's something along those lines, right? So where this $20 gajillion camera can show when blood rushes to certain areas of the body. And what they've discovered is that when a dog is anxious, certain parts of the ears are cold and or hot, and when the dog is the anxiety is dissipating, certain parts of the ears turn yellow or start to glow, and they can see these transitions, and they're learning quite a bit from that as to when, which dogs, even with relaxed body language, are experiencing anxiety. Now again, I don't have an extra couple of $1 million to spend on one of those cameras, and most average owners don't either, but can we learn from these studies and decide that maybe a larger percentage of dogs that don't even display typical separation anxiety symptoms would benefit from a modified separation anxiety protocol. That might be something that we discover, and I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I think it's something that research will hopefully suss out for us.
Yeah, I'm interested. So with Phoebe, she follows me from room to room. And my partner says she's completely different when I'm not here. She often waits at the door and she kind of looks at the window. She's alert to every sound. If I'm leaving the room and I'm home and go out to the kitchen or something, she stays here. She's barking. I have filmed her, and I know she's kind of waiting at the door. When we film her, when we go out, so we go out for a couple of hours and she has to stay home because we're going somewhere, she can't come with us. She's sleeping the whole time. So I'm looking at my data and kind of going, but what if she's like quite stressed right now? Or so I guess the question I'm asking is maybe we kind of use, like you said, modified separation techniques and collect our data and see what happens.
Yeah, I love that you make that distinction and sort of wonder about your dog. So my personal dog is a recovered separation anxiety dog. And I will say, knock on wood for that, because if I couldn't fix my own dog, I would be in big trouble, right? One of the things that's interesting is I know my dog very well, as most, dog owners do, particularly trainers, because we read their body language so well. And one of the things that I do watch with my own dog is what are her patterns and what are the trends in her behavior when I am home. And then if I watch her when she is alone, are those patterns and trends in her behavior the same? Because that, to me, would be indicative of she could care less that she's alone, right? Now, obviously, before, when she had full-blown separation anxiety, I knew. I mean, she would be barking and howling and freaking out. But now that she's recovered, one of the things that I find fascinating, and which to me, that I still, do a little more work with her, or that I need to accept that she'll never be 100%, thrilled about me being gone, is that her patterns of behavior and the trend in her body language is different when I am absent, or when my partner and I are absent. And it's not an overt display of anxiety, but it is different. And I think about that a lot. So yeah, it's interesting that you noticed about your dog as well.
Yeah, and one thing we've done a lot with Phoebe is chasing the cat. Chasing one of the cats. We have two cats, different behaviors around each individual, and we've managed to do great with that. But early on, back last year when we were filming her, and I remember the first time we did it, and she was standing there. We'd left, just kind of like looking towards the door, and the cat just walked straight past her. And I went, what are you doing, Phoebe? And that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? Like that pattern of behavior is different in those two situations. So we don't have a $20 gazillion camera, as you put it, but we can look at data like that and potentially do modified approaches.
Yeah. And, from a science-based, true analytical point of view, can we make the leap to say, oh, because Phoebe's not chasing the cat, she's obviously anxious? That's incorrect science. But can we say, well, she might be anxious, therefore there's no harm in doing a modified protocol to see if it helps her, right? I mean, sure.
So just grab some off-the-shelf Malena spreadsheets. I don't know where we find those.
That's a new side business for me. I'm going to start creating, pre-created spreadsheets and selling them at $1 a pop.
We had Ryan O on the show recently, the daily behavior analyst, and we're talking about AI. And there's cameras now that will record your pet when you're out. Well, there's with horses, and they can measure changes in typical behavior, and they will send you data about that, and it'll alert you. And it's amazing. Like I said, in 5 years from now, I'm very excited where that's going. But let's go back to someone rings you up and they say, typical behaviors, falling in the middle of that bell curve of what separation anxiety related behaviors look like. We've got vocalizations or pacing or whining or destructive types of behaviors. And they say, hey, can you come help me? What is your next move?
Well, before I answer that question entirely, I'm going to focus in on one word that you just used is, can you come help me? And the reason I want to focus in on that word is, and this is becoming more and more acceptable in a lot of other behaviors as well, but one of the reasons I want to focus in on that word is I think separation anxiety and many other behaviors, but separation anxiety in particular, benefits so greatly from remote consultation. I have people that I have worked with that literally live walking distance from my home, and I have never met them in person. And part of the reason is that if I come over to your house and I meet you and your dog, and then I say, hey, let's leave and see how Fluffy reacts, well, that's like really not a normal absence routine for you. And what I want to see is, okay, Sally, I want you to go through your normal getting ready routine and then walk out the door. So I see, I'm watching you through the keyhole, the proverbial keyhole, using online tools. And so there's no change in environment or change in dynamic for your dog. And then I can watch Fluffy and see how she reacts and call you back in the moment that I notice that there's any indication of anxiety, so I know how we're going to proceed with her. So I just want to give like a huge shout out to how remote technology has changed the entire efficiency and effectiveness of working with separation anxiety, because I didn't have these tools, 9-10 years ago, or not with the availability level that we have them now. So back to your question, when someone calls and says, okay, I need help, and we have a bit of dialogue, and I'm fairly certain that yes, this is some form of separation anxiety or separation related behaviors or isolation distress, we go ahead and agree to work together. I personally, because I'm very, very in belief of the fact that setting expectations for these clients is so important. Separation anxiety training is very slow. And so I require a minimum amount of time that any client will work with me. And it's actually not even that long. It's a 4-week commitment. And I require that, and I tell them, by the way, I want you to know your dog is not going to be fixed in 4 weeks. It's just my minimum requirement. And I want you to think in terms of months, not weeks, that your dog will start to see, a trajectory towards recovery. And I think it's so important that we are transparent about that, and that we set people up for proper expectation. Otherwise, they are going to say, well, I tried that training, positive reinforcement, desensitization thing, and it didn't work. And then they may very well go knocking on the door of the guy that uses that electric collar, and so we have to constantly be setting them up and shaping them and reinforcing them about the fact that it is a slow process, but it is the most humane and effective and gold standard treatment for, this challenging disorder. And so we set up an initial assessment where we do this viewing of the dog and kind of gather the body language and the indicators of what the dog is doing. We also gather a lot of the pre-departure cues. So what does the person normally do? Do they go out the front door, the garage door? Do they pick up their keys? Do they, do they have a whole routine where they have to, go to a closet room, blah, 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 all these sort of things. And we kind of jot those down and file them for later. And then we create what I call, and all of the graduates of my program call, a mission. So, a bit of a, mission if you choose to accept it. And we create a series of steps, and it is written by us dependent on exactly what that dog's threshold is and exactly what that client's household layout is. And they get those in a spreadsheet, of course, and they are to follow those, and they write their notes as to how the dog reacted to each and every individualized step. And fortunately, because of technology, they can watch their dog live on their smartphone or tablet while they're going through each of those steps. And based on their notes, they will get an individualized mission for the very next day. And we do that 5 days a week. So there's zero guesswork for these clients on any given day. And then we reassess live once a week, and we continue in that fashion. And I will add that a lot of practitioners will be like, whoa, that's way too much work. I could never, be in contact in a spreadsheet 5 days a week. But I will say that, number one, it doesn't take that much time. I probably spend 10 to 15 minutes per client per day, other than the live reassess. And number two, I think it truly changes the relationship with the client, where there's a level of motivation, accountability, and relief that they experience that just is unparalleled.
So we're going to skip forward then to a question, because you teach all of this stuff to people that want to learn it. It's potentially the fear of having to learn how to do these spreadsheets and everything, which might turn people off as well.
Of course.
Not just implementation. So we had this for a little bit later, but let's talk about it now, because you have a online certification program that you offer to instructors and professionals that want to learn this stuff. Do you want to talk to that maybe and tell people where they can go to find out more information and what to expect in that? And also you can tag onto that about some of your other offerings, maybe in that $99 course, maybe for people that aren't at that level but still want to build upon where they currently are with their understanding.
You bet. I'm going to, at the risk of potentially adding an extra minute or two to our time, I want to tell you a bit of a funny story about how this certification course came about. Many years ago, I I was at the point working with separation anxiety, and the book had come out, and I was just getting so many clients that I just thought, what on earth am I going to do? I can't take on as many clients as are coming in per day. I was getting on average, 2 to 5 inquiries a day for new clients. And my caseload was, there's full and there's too full, and whatever the next level is, that's where I was. And I was just working so many hours, and I just didn't really have anybody that I could refer to that I felt comfortable with, because I was doing things so much differently than other people were doing them. And so I talked to my dear friend and wonderful business confidant, Veronica Bautel, and I said, Veronica, what am I going to do? And I know she's been featured on your podcast before, and done some wonderful things with you. And she said, well, you should hire an apprentice and teach them. And I was like, okay, that's my next move. And then it was great. Like a day or two later, I was talking with her again, and I said, Veronica, I'm going to fill up the apprentice's schedule in like 2 weeks. And she said, well, maybe if you, bring on 2 apprentices. And it was like the light bulb went off in both of our heads at the same time, where we were like, well, if I'm going to write a whole curriculum to train 2 apprentices, I may as well create a program that teaches other trainers to do this. I never expected it to grow to the level that it has. I thought I'll probably teach, 3 to 5 people, and that'll be good. And now, we continue to grow and grow. So the separation anxiety certification program is a 13-week, fairly intensive course. And while it is quite heavy on the educational side, we also have a fair amount of fun. I like to keep it that way. And it is myself, of course, as the main instructor, but I do have some co-instruction from some of the leading certified separation anxiety trainers to help me with it. We go very specifically through individual slices of separation anxiety training twice a week in live discussion groups online. And there are, twice a week, there are recorded webinars that are to be listened to prior to our discussion groups. There's homework, there's videos, there's missions or criteria to be written. There's a lot of dissection of, what does separation anxiety look like? How do we dissect this body language? How do we counsel the clients? What do we do about regressions? How do we, by the way, do these spreadsheets, and how do we create them, and how do we track data? And, what about working with vets, and how does pharmacology play a role in all of this? And, so there's so many aspects of separation anxiety that go far beyond let's stuff a Kong and put him in a crate, and I am so proud of every single one of the CSATs that have come through this program and that are out working with separation anxieties dogs. And I think the thing that is most rewarding for me is that we have created a really tight-knit network where we have a closed Facebook group for all graduates, and we share ideas and thoughts and success stories and moments of difficulty, and we really support each other in a way that is just unparalleled. We really are quite awesome at being able to find ways to help one another with our cases. And I'm so grateful that we've been able to foster that kind of environment. And I know that we will continue to do so. And we have continuing education discussions and all sorts of stuff. So I think the program is an amazing way for those of you that think, wow, separation anxiety is something that I think would be awesome to work with, but I've just always been, having feelings of trepidation about working with it. This is a way to truly hone your skills and either make it a specialty or make it something that you could devote a portion of your hours to. We'd certainly love to have any skilled trainers in the program. There's an application on my website, and there's additional information on my website about the certification program, so you can go there. On the flip side, Ryan mentioned this $99 course. This $99 course was developed for guardians of separation anxiety dogs. So it's very different. It's not about teaching you to be an expert in separation anxiety. Having said that, it's really quite informative. I really put a lot of information in there. So, if you're a trainer that just feels like, I'd like to learn more about separation anxiety, I don't necessarily want to take on those cases, but I'd like to be informed, that's something that could be quite useful for you. And certainly if you're feeling like, hey, I have a client that I don't know what to do with them and I don't want to work with separation anxiety, that's always an option. That if you just don't know where to send them and there's no local trainers in your area, you can always send them there. It's a pretty comprehensive course. There's 31 actual lessons in the course. There's a printable manual that is about 30 pages. And there's a lot of video interviews and some video of separation anxiety dogs that are dissected for the guardians to review. So yeah, I'm really happy with it, and I hope that really the bottom line was that I was hoping that we would get proper information out there for dog owners with separation anxiety, as opposed to them searching around on the internet and finding crazy ideas of, doing stuff that's just going to waste their money and their time and reduce their emotional bandwidth.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for all of that, and we'll link to all of the stuff in the write-up as well. Big shout out to Veronica, who is awesome. And you said that that's helpful for people who might not have the skill set but really want to help out clients in their local areas but don't know any professionals that to refer them to or live close by. Kind of going off topic here, but I would like to get your input on this, because it's something that I found with Animal Training Academy members. It's come up again and again and again. They've come across a separation anxiety case or an aggression case or something that they just feel is out of their realm of expertise and experience. But there's no one in there for hours that's got any experience and skill set in this area, and they feel pressured to help these people out. And obviously they want to help out, and they realize if they don't help out, then those people are lost, and they're on the internet and they're finding these bogus solutions. What input do you have? What offerings can you share for people in that position? And we're talking about professional trainers now.
Well, if we're talking about separation anxiety specifically, which is probably the only nod that I can give to it, well, that's not totally true, but because separation from what we do, separation anxiety training is done entirely remotely. So I have clients in pretty much every hemisphere, every time zone, everything around the world at this point. I actually am not even going to tell you where it is because I would be too embarrassed. I got a inquiry a couple of months ago from somewhere in the world that I had never heard of, and I was a little embarrassed. I was like, I don't even know where this is. I'm so embarrassed. I have to look it up, and I don't have any idea where the time zone is. But I mean, we have clients in just everywhere. And so with that respect, don't feel pressured if you don't want to work with separation anxiety or you don't yet have the skill set to work with separation anxiety. Feel free to, whether that is sending them, to our website or finding out who, internationally you feel the most comfortable with that does have the skill set because it's done remotely. And I will say, while this list is not out yet, and I assume that there will be more educational programs that will be creating such lists. A lot of behavior issues can be handled remotely. And I'm sort of making a, shout out to my personal alma mater, but the Academy for Dog Trainers is putting together a list of trainers who are willing to work remotely on most any and all behavior problems, because there are, desert, and I don't mean literal desert, but, trainer desert areas all around the world where there's nothing but positive punishment trainers. And we can make a tremendous difference using remote training. I have a friend that works with clients that are in a couple of different places, but a lot of them that are in Iran, and because she sort of developed a referral base where there are, a fair amount of expats, and she's working aggression cases and, all sorts of things. And the way she's doing it is brilliant because she's teaching them about, desensitization and counter conditioning from not only a explanation and theoretical standpoint, but she is standing in front of her Skype, Zoom, whatever, and saying, okay, this is the way you're going to hold your treat, and this is the order of events, and this is, you will never, give the treat before X antecedent occurs, and blah, 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 so she's going through the process and using her dog as a demo while the individual watches, and then she watches, at that point using a dummy dog or just a, whatever, and she's going through muzzle, counter conditioning with the clients. She's doing all that, and it has been working brilliantly. So I say, my personal advice is I think it's best to be completely transparent with your clients as to what you feel comfortable with taking and that which you don't feel comfortable taking. If there's no one locally that you feel can be of help, I think there is remote help available.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything so far. Sadly, we are nearly at the end, but that is okay because as sad as it is, we're also heading into one of my favorite parts of the show, and this is story time. Malena, could you please share with everyone listening 2 or 3, or let's just say 1 because of time, one story from your experience training animals so far and an important lesson it's taught you?
Oh, Ryan, I could talk with you all afternoon. And of course, I have 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 for that matter stories. But I'm just going to share one with you, and I will do my best to keep it short. But I think there's an important lesson in this one. There certainly was an important lesson for me, and I hope that it resonates with you. the dog's name was Holly, and her guardians were awesome, and they worked tirelessly with me. And we would work and work and work and work, and we would get up to 10 or 15 minutes, and then suddenly Holly would have a regression. And mind you, regressions are very normal in the process of working with separation anxiety dogs, as they are with many behavior issues. You know, it's a 3-step forward, 1 or 2 step back process with a lot of behavior problems. And so, you know, we would get there and she would regress a little, and then they would be devastated. They were very, you know, hearts on their sleeve kind of people. And every time I would pull out my factory installed pom-poms and I would say, it's okay, regressions, it's all information. We're just going to reset where we are, and we're going to move forward, and we're going to get there. And we would, you know, reset our criteria, and we would march away towards building back up, and we would get a little further, and inevitably we would hit another regression. And mind you, when I tell you this story, it is a couple that went on with me for quite some time. So months passed, and we were still riding this roller coaster of forward and backward and forward and backward and forward and backward. So I'll skip over some of the bits and pieces, and but I will tell you that right around 1 year of working together. Now, not everybody has that, you know, bandwidth, but right around 1 year of working together, I was at a point where I thought, personally, I just felt that I was failing them. And I just felt depleted. And I felt that maybe, just maybe, this was one of those dogs that I wasn't going to be able to help. Maybe she was that dog that fell into some statistical, speaking of statistics, you know, realm that, well, this percentage of dogs just can't be fixed. And while I was devastated because I had worked with them for so long and had built, you know, quite a lovely relationship with them, this doubt was eating at me. And I had decided, I think I need to talk to them and tell them, you know, I'm so sorry, but I'm out of ideas as to how to move forward. So we had a live assessment appointment set up, and I thought maybe this is the day that I talk to them about this. I'm not sure, but I think so. So we get online together, and before 2 words came out of my mouth, Holly's mom said, I have to ask you a serious question. And I said, okay, sure. And she said, would you ever consider giving up on us? And my heart sank. And I thought, oh my gosh, has this woman been reading my mind? And she said, wait, before you answer that question, I want you to consider something. My husband and I would, number 1, never relinquish Holly. Obviously, we would never euthanize Holly. We would do anything in our power to help her. We will go the distance to make sure that she has the best life possible. So in my mind, is there any harm in continuing to try and continuing to work a separation anxiety protocol, even if it only gets us 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, maybe to an hour? She said, okay, now go ahead and answer the question. And I was like, well, And in that moment, I realized she's right. Like, what harm is there in us continuing to modify and adjust and tweak and look at things from the right side, from the left side, from the top side, from the bottom side? And I totally opened up my thought to saying, okay, I can do this and find out better and better and better ways to adjust criteria. And I went all in. Almost 1 year to the day of that conversation, I graduated Holly and her guardians with 4 hours of fully calm and relaxed absences. And to this day, what that has shown me and what that makes me believe to the core of my being, and I have felt it with every single client that I have ever worked with from that point forward, is that the only limitation to resolving separation anxiety, and these are real and understandable limitations, but the only limitation is that yes, people have financial restrictions, they have emotional bandwidth restrictions. There are restrictions upon how much they can continue to work on it. But to me, Holly and her parents are absolutely, truly, unequivocally, like bring me to tears moment. Would you ever give up on us? My answer is no.
Beautiful. And I think it's going to be so helpful for people. How are you feeling right now telling that story?
I remember it as if it was yesterday. And I think it's great that you asked me how I feel, because what I feel is, I hope if whoever listens to this podcast, I hope that what they take away from everything we've talked about, obviously, but from that story is, so many people feel like separation anxiety is unfixable, and I don't think it is. And actually, from what I've been doing for the last 18 years of working with separation anxiety, I don't think that separation anxiety is unfixable. I've seen it time and time again. And now I have, over 60 graduates that are repeating what I do, and they're seeing it time and time and time again and having success as well.
And I like what you said in there at some point. It's all information. I like to think that every time you try something and it doesn't work, it's just getting you one step closer to that end goal.
That's right.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just before we do wrap up, share it with everyone listening, your vision for the future. What do you want to see happen in our positive reinforcement animal training world, the separation anxiety community? What do you want to see happen over the coming years, over the 5 to 10 years that we have to look forward to? And more. We obviously have more than that to look forward to. I just realised how silly that sounded. Anyway, I'm going to let you answer the question.
That's an awesome question. What I actually really feel so strongly about, and I'm really looking forward to from a perspective of change, is that there will be additional collaboration between trainers, vets, veterinary behaviorists, researchers, other academic professionals, everything from the dog walkers and the groomers and can we all, sort of collaborate in such a way that there isn't sort of academia on one end and VBs and vets on another end and trainers in another area. Like, I think we have so much information to share. And for me, from a trainer's perspective, I feel like we can take all that evidence-based stuff that the researchers and the VBs and vets and stuff have, and we can actually make it happen. We can implement it. We can create the effective implementation of all that science-based information, right? And so I would love to see that collaboration between us, be way more widespread. One of the things, and I'll close on this, in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 or more years, separation anxiety seems to be more, for lack of a better term, I'll say more popular from the owner's perspective. Okay, so everybody is saying, oh, my dog has separation anxiety, my dog has separation anxiety. And yes, certainly many of them do. And yes, of course, some of them don't. And that's not the point, really. I think what this is showing us is that there's a growing recognition from the guardian perspective that dogs have important needs and emotions. And separation anxiety just happens to be a term that they're like, it must be separation anxiety, because they see some sort of fearfulness or they see some sort of worry. And separation anxiety is an easy one for them because they've heard it. It's enough media display that they've heard it. And this is not to toot my own horn, but, I have been featured in like Men's Health and Cooking Light. So there you go. I mean, like, it's been given attention even in like national publications that have nothing to do with dogs, right? So I love that there's owner awareness at this point, that they're wanting to address their dog's welfare needs and emotional needs, which I think personally puts an incredibly important burden on us as professionals to get it right from a treatment standpoint, from a diagnosis standpoint, from a medication standpoint, from all aspects, which leads back to that collaboration, because, the VBs, the vets, the researchers, all the academia people, and yes, us as trainers and behaviorists, we all have some piece of that puzzle that we need to contribute to. So that's where my hope is for the future.
No one can argue with that. Collaboration. And we can say on the podcast that separation anxiety. I can't say that. I was about to say something and then it just. Well, about Sarah Alving's podcast, we said making stimulus control sexy again, but then saying the term separation anxiety has become sexy. It does not work. So
well, I almost said separation anxiety has become so popular. It's almost like everybody who glommed onto gluten intolerance. And then I thought, I'm going to totally offend somebody that's gluten intolerant, so I better not say that.
Yeah. Let's just say it's become popular. Good choice of words. You did good there. And let's all collaborate. No one can argue with that. Hey, thank you so much for sharing everything today, Lena. It's been so much fun. From myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we really appreciate you taking the time today to come on the show, to catch up with me a month ago, to send me messages back and forth, to put up with me, my terrible pronunciation of your name, which hopefully we didn't get any of that on air, and everything else. We really appreciate all of the time and effort you put into us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This was really fun, and I appreciate you letting me babble on. That was great.
Passion talking, as our good friend Teresa McEwen says. We absolutely love it here at the show, and we, of course, really appreciate all of you out there tuning in today as well. If you have enjoyed this episode and you're interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of the episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com, click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. there's something there for absolutely everyone, and we're looking forward to having you join the tribe. That's it for this episode, though. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks again, everyone, so much for listening, and you'll hear from us again soon.